I stood quietly in a dim corner of the event hall, watching a couple sway on the dance floor, their eyes locked as he pulled her in closer, her chest rising and falling against his firm frame, their movements elegant, he with the effortless grace of an athlete, and she mirroring him with practiced ease, all eyes drawn to them, sensing an undeniable emotional current, maybe not love, but certainly something deeper than simple friendship. Her honey blonde hair flowed gently as she leaned into him. Though it was more his firm grip than her own will that kept her there, I might have felt jealous of their connection, if it weren't for one thing. The woman in his arms was my wife, Elise, married to me for 11 years, now wrapped in the arms of her boss. Instead of envy, I felt a surge of anger and shame. This wasn't our first time at the company's annual gala, and everyone there knew she was my wife. I could see the curious glances, people searching for me in the crowd, waiting for a scene. After 3 dances, they left the floor and rejoined a table surrounded by her co-workers. I watched her eyes glow with admiration, a look I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. The disgust building inside me became harder to contain. I could feel something boiling over, but I told myself I had to hold on, just a little longer. I was caught in a storm of emotions, fear, bitterness, betrayal, colliding with the love, trust, and respect I once held for the woman now so clearly slipping away from me. It was a fight I was losing, sinking deeper into despair, weighed down by helplessness and self-pity. Over the past few months, I had tried everything to save our marriage: romantic dinners, surprise flowers, doing more at home, even turning off the TV just to have a real conversation, only for her to walk away. I wrote heartfelt notes, left cards filled with love, and still found them thrown in the trash. I even sent flowers to her office, no response, no sign it meant anything to her. What else was there to do but wait? I asked myself, pushing back those suffocating thoughts. I made my way to the temporary bar set up near the side of the room, standing behind Rachel, a former co-worker of Elise's. Having a good time? I asked, trying to seem casual. I always love these parties, she said with a half laugh. And you know Adam can't resist free drinks. I nodded with a polite smile, lifting my empty glass. Me too, by the way. Have you seen Kevin's wife around? She's usually here, Rachel, now a few drinks in, answered without much of a filter. Oh, didn't Natalie tell you? Kevin filed for divorce today. I guess she wasn't exactly holding up her end of the marriage. Her words stung, not because of the gossip, but because of the mirror it held up to my own situation. No, she didn't mention it, I said calmly, although I was lying. We hadn't come straight from work like I claimed. We'd taken the afternoon off to get ready, plenty of time for her to mention something, but she didn't. I refilled my rum and Diet Coke, then grabbed a glass of white wine for Elise, making my way over to her and Kevin, who were still deep in conversation. They didn't notice me at first. Elise, I brought you some wine, I said, handing it to her. She flinched, startled. Oh, you scared me, she said, accepting the drink. Thank you, honey. The moment became unbearably awkward. Most people at the table found new interest in their napkins, while others stared at me openly, curious about what I was thinking, and how much I had noticed. One younger guy, maybe mid-20s, smirked when he saw me staring at the table. We locked eyes for a moment, then his grin vanished, and he too stared blankly at the centerpiece. Around 1 a.m., most of the guests had already left the hotel hall, heading home, but Elise didn't seem ready to leave her dance partner just yet. We should probably head home, honey. We still need to drop off the babysitter, and we promised we'd be back before 2, I said, feeling like an unwelcome interruption. Sure, okay, I think it's time, she said with a smile, turning to Kevin. See you Monday. Relief rippled through the group, sensing the tension finally breaking. Kevin, good to see you, I added, extending my hand. He shook it firmly, maybe a little too firmly, trying to assert himself. Standing a few inches taller than me, probably outweighed me by 15 pounds, and I couldn't help but notice my stomach pressing forward a bit more than it used to. I met his gaze, sensing deceit and self-righteousness in his eyes. Eventually he released my hand and bid us good night. I waved to the remaining guests as we exited the room and headed to the car. We remained silent during the drive home, although Kelsey wore a radiant smile. Upon arriving home, Kelsey checked on Caitlin, our 9-year-old daughter, while I settled up with Brittany and prepared to take her home. Upon my return, I headed to the bedroom to find Kelsey already asleep in bed. After checking on Caitlin, I visited the bathroom before retiring to the spare room for the night. I knew any possibility of closeness between us was out of the question tonight, as I struggled to recall the last time we had been carnal. With my eyes closing, the ceiling was the last thing I saw before slipping into a restless sleep. Rising early on Saturday morning, I mentally went through my checklist for the day. Caitlin was already in the living room, engrossed in her shows, and I offered a slight wave from the doorway. Have you had breakfast yet? I inquired. Yep, she confirmed, waving a spoon dripping with milk, splattering drops onto the carpet. All right, settle down, Mom's still sleeping, and I need to get to work in my office, I reminded her. Got it, Dad, she replied with unnecessary volume, causing me to chuckle. Around 8:30, I dialed my lawyer's cell phone, knowing he often worked from home on Saturday mornings. Good morning, Bill, it's Matthew Franks, I greeted. Morning, Matt, I'm guessing this isn't a cheery call, he responded, already anticipating the nature of the conversation. You got it, it's time to set the plan in motion. I've learned that Jason served his wife yesterday. Any word if Kelsey has consulted with a lawyer yet? I don't think so, but I'll double check. Let's meet at the coffee shop in half an hour. Make sure to sign and date the forms with my assistant for notarized paperwork first thing Monday morning, and serve her at lunch. Bill outlined the plan. Sounds good to me. See you soon, I confirmed before ending the call. Arriving early at the coffee shop, I offered a faint smile to the person behind the counter before collecting my order and settling into a cozy chair by the fireplace, lost in thought. I never imagined I'd be divorcing the one true love of my life. It's challenging to pinpoint the exact moment when you realize your comfortable life is unraveling. For me, it was triggered by a traffic ticket, one of those automatic camera checks for running a red light. When the notice arrived in the mail, I chuckled, instantly recognizing it as Kelsey's doing. She always flipped on her headlights when in a rush. I opened the envelope, deciding to silently shed tears instead of speaking. It seemed futile to confront this directly. The photo depicted Kelsey with a man's shoulder and arm visible beside her, though his face wasn't shown. I knew who it was. Nothing seemed particularly suspicious. She could have been at lunch or a meeting. I checked the date, March 5th, and something about it bothered me. Recalling our text messages, I remembered plans to stop by Mary's after work to pick up clothes for Kate. At the time, it didn't strike me as unusual. Despite my suspicions, I dismissed them, attributing it to Mary's usual generosity. Checking the intersection on Google Maps revealed it was on the opposite end of town from Mary's residence. Still, I tried to convince myself it could be innocent. However, as I pieced together events since late November, doubts grew. Kelsey had kept a low profile, and holiday arguments became commonplace. By January, affection dwindled and our conversations revolved around work or Caitlin. We no longer discussed our dreams, family vacations, or our future together. Since childhood, I've had a trust fund. Initially, my great-grandfather purchased undeveloped land in the Pacific Northwest, selling portions as the local town expanded. Upon his passing, I inherited proceeds from these sales, boosting the fund. Following my grandfather's pass away, it grew once more. Thankfully, my family's self-sufficiency meant I never had to dip into it. The balance stabilized and even grew slightly through accrued interest. Upon my father's demise, with my mother also deceased, I inherited all family property, merging it with my trust. With our accumulated wealth, we were on the verge of settling for life. However, Kelsey and I continued to work and increase our net worth in anticipation of retirement. I obtained a prenuptial agreement to safeguard the fund. Throughout our marriage, Kelsey and I regularly updated our prenup and wills. One clause that remained unchanged was the standard divorce clause delineating asset ownership. We also included a provision for Caitlin's education in case of my passing or divorce, with specific conditions regarding the circumstances to ensure preparedness. I maintained access to legal and accounting services, seeking advice as I tried to determine my next steps. I reached out to my lawyer for a referral to the best local divorce attorney and scheduled a consultation for later that week. Given the strength of our prenuptial agreement, he wasn't concerned about any major financial repercussions. I'm not ready to pull the trigger yet, I clarified. I just need guidance. A sense of where this might go. Well, Matt, one option is to hire a private investigator, Bill said. Someone who can dig deeper and figure out if there's actually something going on. I leaned back in my chair. That's what I was thinking. Can you make it happen? Unfortunately, he said with a sigh, all my regular guys are tied up with other cases. It could be weeks before they can prioritize yours. Weeks. I didn't have that kind of patience. This was already keeping me up at night. Is there any other option? I asked. There is, but it's not exactly conventional, he said, pausing. We jokingly call him Larry the Rogue, former cop, got kicked off the force after some complaints and questionable decisions. He's been trying to turn over a new leaf, but I'll be honest, he's not the most trustworthy guy. I chuckled despite myself. Why the nickname? Because he plays dirty, but he gets results. He's known for collecting everything: photos, videos, call logs, emails, even recorded phone calls. Let's just say he has a talent for walking the fine line between what's legal and what's admissible. I'm okay with a little gray, I replied, as long as we're covered legally if we need to act on it. Bill nodded. Fair enough. he can get started immediately. Just, don't build a long-term relationship with him. That's fine. We'll use him now, then switch to someone more legit if it goes further. Can he start today? I'll make the call and let you know. Back in my office, I prepped a stack of paperwork for both the lawyer and the rogue investigator. I routed the retainer payment through my accountant and kept the expense off our shared books. I didn't want Kelsey knowing anything, especially if this whole mess turned out to be a misunderstanding or just a phase. Despite everything, I still tried to save my marriage. Life had taught me that people don't change without a reason. I wasn't sure what was driving Kelsey's behavior or if we were too far gone, but I needed to try. I did everything a good husband should do: acts of service, affection, supper. I became more attentive, more present, but every gesture was met with cold detachment. Her smiles were forced, her affection mechanical. It became clear we'd passed the point of no return. Then came Thursday. Bill called and asked me to meet at his office to go over Larry's findings. I entered the room with a pit in my stomach and a folder full of dread. What he showed me shattered me. Hours of footage, clear, damning, irrefutable. Jason and Kelsey, together, in public, in cars, in private spaces, intimate moments caught on camera, emails, call logs, love notes. There was no denying it anymore. As I watched, I felt my world disintegrate. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to breathe. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I had to lean forward, hands on knees, fighting off the wave of nausea that hit me. The final blow came in the form of an audio recording. Taken just the day before. Jason's voice: "Do you love me?" Kelsey: a soft laugh. "Yes. You're perfect. I love you. I want us to be a family." Jason: "You, me, and Caitlin." Kelsey: a stunned silence. Then, hesitantly, "What about Matt and Shannon?" Jason: "We'll divorce them. You'll have Caitlin. And we'll be happy together." Another pause. You could hear the wheels turning in Kelsey's mind. "You really love me?" she asked. Kel: "Yes. Absolutely." I hadn't truly considered leaving Matt, not until Jason pushed the idea so casually. "Think about it for a moment," he said. "He can't offer you what I can. You'll be the belle of every ball, part of the elite. You'll experience luxuries he can only dream of." There was disdain in his voice, and I could imagine the smug look on his face. "Losing Kate will devastate him. They're his whole world. But I'll be a better father than he could ever be. In a year, she won't even want to visit him." "Why do you hate him so much?" Kelsey asked, a trace of concern in her voice. "What did he ever do to you?" That part struck me. I wasn't sure I even knew the answer myself. "He's not worthy of you, Kels. He lacks ambition. He's just another cog in someone else's machine." "He's a plant manager," she said firmly. "His facility employs 400 people. It's the top-performing plant per square foot in the region." I felt a flash of pride and pain. She still remembered those details, she still cared. But this conversation shouldn't have happened in a hotel room. It should have been in our home. "He's weak," Jason continued. "A beta. No MBA. No drive. I could crush him without breaking a sweat." "Don't assume you're superior to Matt," she snapped back. "You don't know what he's overcome. He grew up around trouble, guns, fights. He could have gone down a dark road. But he didn't. He chose education. That's why he started college late." There was pride in her voice. Too much pride for someone supposedly in love with another man. "Promise me you won't use violence," she added. "Not for Kate's sake. And not for mine. I'm not in love with him anymore. But you've replaced him now. You're my love." She paused, thinking. How will it work when we divorce them? Simultaneously. I need time to prepare. Shannon hasn't been well, and we haven't been intimate in a year. She won't fight the 50-50 split. Okay, Kelsey added, but file first. Before I speak to a lawyer. She wanted safety. Stability. Even at the cost of honesty. Come here, woman, Jason muttered. Then, silence. The recording ended. I looked at Bill, trying to process the surge in my chest. Anger. Betrayal. But worse, the sinking ache of being replaced. You have to strike first, Matt, Bill said quietly. But even if you do, it may not change anything. They rarely turn back once they cross this line, he added. I looked at the men beside him, the so-called scoundrel. Larry. Early 30s, sharp suit, lean frame. Not what I expected. He was respectful, intelligent, maybe even sincere. Would you still want her after hearing all that? Larry asked. I didn't answer. Not right away. You're probably right, I said finally. Then I turned to Bill. Give me a day or two. I'll be in touch. Shall we prepare the documents now and finalize the details later? Bill asked. Yes. Let's proceed that way. Larry handed me his business card. My personal number, Mr. Franks, if you ever need me. Please, Larry. Call me Matt. If you decide to pursue revenge, he added with a crooked grin, I know some people. They don't call me Larry the Dastard for nothing. I forced a smile. Appreciate it, Larry. I doubt I could ever go through with it. Not against Kells. But, it's good to know I have options. Larry nodded and walked to his car. That weekend, I didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Kelsey, it seemed, had made her choice, blind to the damage, blind to the storm she'd left behind. Doubt. Rage. Fear. But most of all, the feeling that my family, my identity, had been torn away without warning. The thought of Jason raising Kate, it poisoned everything. Sunday morning, clarity came. I sat on the back porch, the headache pounding behind my eyes, the silence thicker than the fog. This wasn't just happening. It had happened. I had already lost my wife. But I would not lose everything else. And I would not let that man take my daughter, or my legacy. Monday morning, I called Bill. Bill. Matt Franks. Good morning, Matt. Have you come to a decision? Yes. I want you to complete all necessary paperwork. Use only the legal photos Larry obtained. Split everything evenly, but we protect what's mine. Understood. And that was the beginning. Not of revenge, but of survival. Of reclaiming control. This time, I lead. I slid an envelope containing $5,000 in cash across the table. This should help you get started, but let me know if you need more. Larry accepted the money, his eyes meeting mine. I think $3,000 will suffice. He may be tough, but at least he's straightforward. Consider the rest as an advance, I replied. I might require your expertise later. Just stay on standby until I contact you. I want to catch them off guard, and I have my reasons for allowing them to make the first move. Oh, and one more thing, we need information on his wife's health issues. Her medical background might impact our decisions down the line. Can you handle that? Absolutely, Larry said without hesitation. And Bill mentioned you were looking into Jason's college years. I'm hoping we uncover something useful, especially if custody becomes a battle. Larry nodded, jotting down a few notes on his pad. After finishing our coffee and exchanging a few stories from his time as a cop, and people we might have known, we shook hands and parted ways. That was 3 months ago. My thoughts returned to the present as Bill arrived, followed closely by his assistant and Larry. Ready to proceed? Bill asked once we were all seated. Yes. It seems that way, I said. Larry, do we have any indication if Kelsey has sought legal counsel? As far as I know, no, I answered. I quickly checked her email after your call, Bill, and didn't see anything suspicious. I'll take a closer look today and should know for sure by Monday morning. Larry grinned, giving me a knowing wink. And what about Jason? I asked, a glimmer of hope rising. Any skeletons in his closet? Well, Larry began, he was under investigation during his time in the fraternity, allegations involving date abduction medications and underage girls at parties. My heart skipped a beat. I've received copies of everything, he continued, and I've already handed them over to Bill. Bill glanced up, confirming, I have them. They could be useful if custody becomes contested. Retrieving the documents we'd spent months working on, Bill indicated where I needed to sign. Once I had, his assistant notarized them. I turned to the group. Larry, can you find out who Shannon Stanton has hired as her lawyer and loop in Bill? Already on it, Larry said. Bill stood and conferred briefly with his assistant. We should prepare the server for Tuesday. I believe we can begin contacting Shannon. She'll likely be updated soon. I'll share the file with her attorney Monday afternoon, provided it doesn't interfere with your conversation with Kelsey that evening. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled deeply. So, things should be fully underway by Wednesday, I said. Matt, have you considered where Kelsey will stay on Monday night? Bill asked suddenly. Would it be an issue for her to stay at the house for a few days? No, not unless a restraining order is obtained and she consents. I wouldn't advise sharing a bed, of course. Legally, it's not a problem, but a less scrupulous lawyer could exploit the situation, Bill cautioned. Don't worry. We're not sharing a bed, I said. And our documents grant me temporary control of the house and custody of Kate, right? Yes, until her attorney files a motion to contest it, or until we reach a mutual agreement, Bill replied. But again, I meant sharing the same bed. It might give off the wrong vibe. I nodded. We're not even close to that. And besides, she hasn't even sensed that something's going on. Hey Larry, I said, changing topics, what did you uncover about Shannon's health? She's been battling depression and bipolar disorder for years, Larry replied. Apparently, her medications have dampened her libido, so Mr. Wonderful went searching elsewhere. I'm not sure I want to know how you got that information, I muttered. Larry simply grinned. Bill pretended to be shocked. Bill, does this have any relevance to our case? I asked. Not at the moment, Bill replied. But it could become important later when we discuss guardianship or determine permanent living arrangements. As Bill jotted a few more notes on his iPad, we wrapped up the strategy session and returned to our respective responsibilities. For the rest of the weekend, a quiet heaviness settled over me. Monday loomed like a storm cloud. Kelsey remained blissfully unaware of the shifting tides, exactly as I intended. On Sunday, I arranged for my aunt to pick up Caitlin from school Monday afternoon and keep her overnight. That would give me space to speak privately with Kelsey about the future. They lived on a small farm just outside the city. Caitlin loved it there, especially the animals and the freedom. My aunt would also take her to school on Tuesday morning, and I decided we'd break the news to Caitlin that evening. When I told Caitlin about the plan, she seemed excited but puzzled. Why can't I come home Monday? She asked. Because we need to have a very important family talk first, I replied, holding her close. She nodded, sensing something bigger behind my calm voice. I kissed the top of her head and forced a smile. I had to hold it together, at least for one more day. I might have accepted it if she had simply fallen out of love with me, if she'd just sat me down and said, Matt, I'm sorry, but I don't love you anymore. But that's not what happened. Jason had taken his time, wormed his way in slowly, and when he finally had her, he pushed me out. Quietly, completely. And I had no power to stop it. Our marriage wasn't just ending, it was already over. All that remained was paperwork. I slid the documents across the table and looked her in the eye. Here's the proposed agreement, I said calmly. I've already filed the petition, so you won't need to worry about that if you agree to the terms. She didn't speak. Just stared at the manila envelope as if it were some kind of bomb waiting to go off. I continued, steady and matter of fact. The prenup still stands, which means my trust remains untouched. I'm offering to liquidate our joint assets and split them equally, including the house. Since I filed first, I'm requesting full custody of Caitlin, with minimal child support. You'll have generous visitation rights, of course. I'll keep her on my insurance, but you'll need to get your own. Still nothing from her. She looked pale. You can keep your 401k, any personal investments from the marriage, and your inheritance from your mom. I don't want what's not mine. We'll divide the assets we built together, fairly. Kate and I will stay in the house until it sells. Also, I'm offering $200,000 from my trust to help you get back on your feet. Finally, her eyes flicked up to meet mine. I saw the guilt, maybe even regret, but I pushed on. If you move forward with Jason, I'd suggest you protect yourself with a prenup. I'm not asking for spousal support. I want you to be self-sufficient. I let the silence stretch as I watched her try to process everything I'd laid out. I think I should have custody of Caitlin, she said finally. She'll need her mother as she grows. I agree, I replied softly. But you'll be involved. Through visits, through phone calls. But frankly, I don't trust Jason around her. He wants a family, he couldn't have one of his own, so now he wants mine. I've already lost you. I'm not letting him take our daughter too. I paused, then added more gently, I understand we'll need to work through custody with the lawyers. I'm willing to keep it civil. Truthfully, I had offered full custody as a gesture of peace, but after seeing Caitlin's reaction to Jason, that peace felt fragile. You can stay in the master bedroom for a few days while you sort things out. I know this is hard, Kelsey. I really do. My love for you, God help me, hasn't disappeared. I thought we were building something together. I imagined us raising our daughter, growing old side by side. I looked down at the table, unsure of how to say what came next. But your actions, I sighed. You've shattered that dream. I'm trying to handle this with dignity and kindness, but don't mistake that for weakness. If you escalate things, if Jason gets involved, I won't hesitate to respond accordingly. I leaned in just a little, my voice low but firm. You know the kind of resources I have. You've seen what I'm capable of when cornered. I don't want to go down that road, but I will if I have to. Her posture stiffened. She'd seen that side of me before. I want us to be civil, for Caitlin's sake. That's what matters now. She deserves two parents who can sit at the same table without turning it into a war zone. I saw her nod slowly, her fingers trembling around the water glass. I'll be available through the end of the week, I continued. By law, you still need to be formally served. That'll happen here at the house. Monday. 9 a.m. sharp. She looked startled. Here. I didn't want to embarrass you at work, I explained. You might want to take a few days off. Let things settle. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all finally starting to land. I know it won't be easy sharing space right now, but I thought, maybe we could sit Caitlin down on Tuesday evening. Or even keep her home Wednesday and talk then. Let her hear it from both of us. Together. Kelsey pushed her barely touched plate away. Her face had gone completely white. She looked sick. Maybe the full weight of what she'd done was finally catching up to her. Maybe she was finally realizing she'd thrown away a man who loved her for someone who played pretend. She looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. Matt, you clearly had a plan. You outmaneuvered us. I don't know how, but you did. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I'll notify work first thing, she continued. I'll be home through Wednesday, maybe longer. Do you think Aunt Alex could keep Caitlin tomorrow night too? We'll keep her home Tuesday. Talk to her then. I nodded. Larry uncovered everything the moment I noticed something was off. I'll call Alex now. It's a good idea. Kelsey nodded faintly, her eyes glassy. She wasn't the same woman I once knew. Or maybe she was, and I just hadn't been willing to see it. Either way, the pieces were moving. And soon, the game would be over. As I mentioned Larry's name, Kelsey silently gathered a few papers. I bid her good night, sensing she needed time alone to process everything. She retreated to the master bedroom, locking the door behind her. It didn't bother me, I had already moved most of my things into the spare room. I grabbed my phone and dialed my aunt, explaining the situation with Caitlin. She agreed to keep her an extra night and bring her back Wednesday morning. I also called Caitlin, who sounded puzzled but accepting. I assured her that my mom and I would explain everything on Wednesday. I tidied up and prepared for bed, but as I lay there, I heard Kelsey murmuring quietly on the phone behind the closed door. Her voice was muffled, but I could make out the soft sobs, the sound of someone mourning the end of a marriage they had once cherished. The next morning, I heard Kelsey downstairs, preparing for work. At exactly 9 a.m., I heard the front door open, and the sound of Kelsey accepting the package from the courier. She took everything, except for the more sensitive materials I had included. Shortly after, she gathered her things, her face void of emotion as she left without saying where she was going. I assumed she was meeting Jason or her lawyer, or maybe someone else who would sympathize with her plight. Later that day, Bill called with an update. Both Jason and the company had received our legal claims, but there was a surprising twist. Shannon had countersued Jason at nearly the same time. Bill emphasized that I should stay vigilant, as Jason had apparently made threats against me. While I didn't expect him to act recklessly, given all that he had gained, I couldn't take any chances. I retrieved my .45 ACP from the weapon safe, ensuring it was loaded, cocked, and locked. I placed it on the chair beside me and turned on the TV, trying to keep calm. Hours passed, but my senses remained sharp. I was standing at the kitchen sink when I spotted the unmistakable silhouette of a black BMW pulling into my driveway. Jason's enraged face appeared through the windshield as he jumped out, retrieving a baseball bat from the back. Sensing immediate danger, I hurried back to my chair where my phone was. I dialed 911, my voice calm despite the rising tension. The operator answered, and I reported that my wife's boyfriend was in the driveway with a baseball bat. As I relayed the information, I heard the screech of tires and voices outside. Kelsey had arrived too, her high-pitched scream cutting through the chaos. Before I could react, the front door shattered under the force of Jason's impact. He stormed inside, bat raised, his furious voice echoing through the house. "I took your wife, and now I'll take your life. I'm going to take your daughter too," he screamed, his words dripping with malice. I remained still, my hand resting on the pistol grip, eyes trained on him. I let him advance, taking another 5 steps closer, before drawing my weapon. His narrowed eyes locked onto mine, filled with fury. The bat was raised above his head, but at a distance of 25 feet, I knew it wouldn't matter. I had a clear shot. The gunshot rang out, deafening in the tense silence. I was trained to aim for my target 3 times, a reflex born from years of practice. Second shot followed immediately after the first. Jason staggered, his body faltering from the impact. By the time the third shot was fired, I noticed movement by the door. I couldn't afford to be distracted, but I had no choice but to focus on the task at hand. The bullet tore through the splintered wood of the front door, narrowly missing Kelsey's head. She had somehow managed to escape without injury, but the sound of her frantic cries only added to the chaos. Jason dropped to his knees, then collapsed face down, lifeless. The house filled with the deafening silence that followed the screams. I stood frozen, weapon in hand, my breath ragged. Sirens wailed in the distance as responding officers neared the house, unsure of the severity of the situation. They immediately restrained Kelsey, handcuffing her by the open door. Her cries, filled with shock and sorrow, continued to echo through the house as I finally snapped back into reality. I was aware of the officers now aiming their weapons at me. "Drop the weapon," one of them shouted. I immediately complied, surrendering my gun. The following 2 weeks were a whirlwind of chaos. Jason was pronounced dead at the scene, his body lying cold on my living room floor. The aftermath was quick: police reports, witness statements, and the undeniable truth that Jason had received both my lawsuit and the updated divorce papers from Kelsey. It didn't take long for him to put the pieces together. He figured out that I had been behind the incriminating photographs, a discovery that had set off the chain of events that ultimately led to his death. Kelsey had stood by him as he opened the envelope from his wife, realizing too late that she, too, had a set of those photos. The discovery led them both to the vice president's office, where they finally admitted to their affair, unaware of the consequences. Kelsey, however, didn't realize that her actions had sealed Jason's fate. Once the company management became aware of their affair, they took swift action, deciding to terminate Jason as the managing director for misconduct. But in Jason's eyes, I had become the embodiment of everything that had ruined his plans. He felt I had robbed him of his future. He believed that I deserved punishment for blocking his path. In a fit of rage, he grabbed one of his souvenir bats from the office and drove straight to my house. Kelsey, spotting him through the conference room window on the second floor, immediately realized what he was planning. She rushed down to intercept him in the driveway, hoping to stop the madness before anything else could go wrong. But neither of them knew the truth. I had been forewarned of their arrival, and I was ready for what would come. Jason didn't hesitate. In the chaos, Kelsey ended up with a black eye when Jason struck her while she tried to prevent him from entering. It was the only injury she sustained in that moment, though the emotional scars lingered much longer. Kelsey endured months of nightmares, police interrogations, legal proceedings, and courtroom appearances. I spoke with her briefly during this time, but we never dove deep into the events that unfolded in our home. Kelsey was a shadow of the woman I had once known, having lost everything, her husband, her lover, and her daughter, within a span of 24 hours. She never truly recovered from it. Throughout the divorce proceedings, Kelsey stayed in touch, but only sparingly. For about a month after the divorce was finalized, she remained somewhat present, though surprisingly, she never enlisted a lawyer or contested the terms. This allowed me to secure custody of Caitlin without much struggle. However, to my surprise, Kelsey never fulfilled her part of the financial settlement. Bill held onto the funds for her but eventually returned them to me a year later. She never came back to the house, choosing instead to stay with family, and then, one day, she vanished completely. Despite a few supervised visits with Caitlin, Kelsey's interactions were often awkward and unproductive. Regardless, I made sure Caitlin was always available for every scheduled visit, whether Kelsey confirmed her attendance or not. Kelsey showed up roughly once every fourth visit. It was clear that something had shifted in her. Over time, I learned that Kelsey had developed a dependency on painkillers and other prescribed medications to manage her mental health. By the time she disappeared, she had become unemployed, isolated, and destitute. Neither Caitlin nor I, nor anyone who knew her, could reach her. She ceased all communication with us. We were left without a wife and mother. Eventually, I sold the house and bought a new one, closer to Caitlin's school, hoping to rebuild our lives. Caitlin and I both sought counseling to cope with the trauma. I attended therapy for 6 months but eventually had to suppress the pain in order to move forward. I had a daughter to care for and a life to lead. Caitlin underwent counseling for several years, off and on, mostly due to her response to the divorce and Kelsey's disappearance. She struggled with numerous psychological challenges, many of which I couldn't fix. It took me 3 years to finally gather the strength to think about dating again. Then, a few months later, I met Jo. She was compassionate, passionate, and incredibly understanding of the situation Caitlin and I had been through. Our relationship progressed slower than either of us had anticipated, but over time it blossomed into something deeper, eventually evolving into a physical relationship. About 16 months later, Jo and I got married. She embraced Caitlin as her own, but we decided not to expand our family further. Life began to stabilize. Caitlin grew, and Jo and I nurtured her as our own. However, the true test came with significant milestones in Caitlin's life, like her high school and college graduations. Those moments reminded us of what we had lost, but also how far we had come. Throughout this time, I enlisted Larry's help several times to track down Kelsey. But every lead proved fruitless. The prevailing belief, shared by the people closest to us, was that Kelsey had likely met an unfortunate end, isolated and in despair. It was a harrowing realization, but we had no choice but to persevere. Life moved forward, and though the memories still lingered, Caitlin and I had to find a way to make peace with what had happened. Through all the trials and uncertainties, I remained grateful for the opportunity to rebuild, to devise a strategy to find the closure I needed, and to take the right steps to make sure Caitlin and I had a future.